the concern is the direction that we are heading. Like, it would seem that this country could become unbearable. Like, it's bad. As Kevin says, it's worse than it was. I know what my hometown was like. I'm not living there anymore. I fled from one state to another. Will I have to actually leave the country, go have to learn another language, or frankly work as a dishwasher because at my age I'm not going to learn the language? Yeah, I'm not there yet, but I could
But
be.
there are tons of organizations you can join that are 90%, 95% white. I mean, you don't have to move anywhere. You can just go down the block to your neighborhood church. Your church, in all likelihood, is going to be 95% one race. That's how churches organize. And so you don't need to go to the Ukraine or Eastern Europe. You go to church. Brundle, you go to church. What's the racial breakdown of your church?
How about the grocery store?
That's not an organization where you have events and you can be
it's the
bond
place I
with people.
spend. Well, no, I mean, I hear you. Like, there are different public spaces in which we spend our time, but there is all the local shopping areas, the restaurants, the parks, where you're forced to interact with people. You're forced to, like, your neighborhood. They could build, the local government where I was from, they have any kind of new development where you build single family houses, you have to build, low income apartments like nearby. You can't just have nice areas. Basically
Oh,
no one can be free from the threat of some, let's just say low income person, taking a quarter-mile walk into your living room and stealing your TV.
well, overwhelmingly, Manhattan is a white place. You're not under this kind of racial assault that you depict. There are a lot of places that are white topias in the United States still. I mean, what's the racial breakdown of your church? What's the racial breakdown of your neighborhood, Brundle? I'm going to assume it's overwhelmingly white.
Yes, it is. It is. But
So
there are
you've
other.
already got a white topia. You are living in a white topia.
I am, except at the grocery store. There's blacks in their disability scooters. You got like 28-year-old black women so fat that they have to scoot around on the scooter. Okay, at the grocery store, or you have where the fact is, like I said, like where I grew up was, I mean, diversity had started, but it's not like it is now. I mean, it's like El Salvador over there, and not necessarily my parents' neighborhood because my parents have big houses, big yards. They just can't afford it. But you can't, all the signs at the grocery store are in Spanish now. Half are in Spanish and English. It's nuts.
You
And
need to go to Whole Foods, bro.
it's
I
just
would
I just got to
assume.
move out. White flight, bro. That's what you just keep moving out. Keep moving out. Like let the black and brown people have access to the high paying jobs in the cities. I'll just go live out in the woods, in the hinterland until they decide that they need to bring some Somali refugees in, and they're going to put them there and seed that area. I mean,
Uh,
they're chasing us down in our own countries. We all know this.
Yeah, they are. They are. The idea is that there's not going to be any escape. That's why it's necessary to bring people from Africa to America. But here's something else to consider. We get used to thinking of history as a linear timeline, and today being an extension of yesterday, and tomorrow being an extension of today. Well, as Herbert Stein famously said, systems continue until they stop. When systems become unworkable, then there is a systemic collapse and it's replaced by something else. I was reading Tim Newman today talking about Tommy Robinson and his plight in Britain and what he's been put through and what is planned for him. And you add to that the treason over Brexit. As I said before, and I'll say again, I believe that Britain is close to a political collapse. And of course, the people who are making the rules now, the people who are pointing the fingers, the people who are threatening us, even for mild expressions of dissent, do not consider it a possibility that if there is a political change, then these tools will be used against them. I mean, they'll have to be used against them. I know the conditions are very bad now, but it is unreasonable and it is ahistoric to believe that oh yeah, once that train starts picking up momentum going down the tracks, it can't be stopped. Well, you know what? What happens if there's no more tracks? What happens if the engine in the train blows up? It's doom sparrow. Well, there's life, there's hope.
Well, I hear you. And I'm not saying that this goes on in perpetuity. I don't have like the Whig view of history, but what I'm saying is that my feeling, like I said, the wheels are going to come crashing off our civilization. It's sort of doomed. Like we have lost the ability to rebuild what is. I mean, something new may be born. The question is at what point? Now, is it at a point where white people are the majorities in their nations, have the demographic advantage and then can rebuild as a dominant force? Or is it likely that we become 20% of the population and then the thing collapses under its own weight? But and I think there's this sense amongst white people that we can sort of take on anybody, even if we have reduced numbers. But as the Jews, who are so much smarter and better than us in all these ways that we constantly talk about, they when you're outnumbered by a great amount, you're going to lose, no matter what kind of advantages you might have individually or in your cohesiveness. So, I'm just concerned, like, does it happen when we're just, we're basically in the Jewish position within our own countries?
The position of the Jews, and haven't you noticed what's happened in the last couple of months? That AIPAC was boasting, this was in Vox Day's blog, that holding up a napkin at a restaurant, in a couple of hours, I could have the signature of 70 senators on this napkin. Essentially, we tell Congress what to do and they do it. And so some Somali woman from Minnesota says Jewish influence is too strong. And suddenly the Jews are at each other's throats. That's how quickly things can move in politics.
Well, there's no question, but I'm not one of these, like, I'm not a Jews or the magic keys. I mean, we talk about Jews. I mentioned Jews and that Kyle's examples of like who we should model ourselves after are Jews, and they're topical. But the fact is, like, okay, great. So the Jews lose influence, but I got Somalis in Congress. Great, we're better off somehow.
But Brundle, I mean, you describe eloquently extremely negative feelings about other races, about being surrounded by other races. But like, my question is, where is this coming from?
It could be a matter of personal experience. One, two, there's a hell of a lot of social conditioning. There's a hell of a lot of social conditioning related to racism. Some people, you just can't break. I mean, I know how I used to think. I used to think, and I like, still, it's like in me where, if you have like the idea of having a black friend that's like an Oreo, a guy that, some non-white that can sort of transcend their upbringing to what's the word, assimilate to like mainstream white American culture. It feels good, like, to see. It feels good to see people that you frankly view in a like a paternalistic way. I mean, I always looked at minorities paternalistically. And I think even a lot of Democrats, like, they won't admit it, but it's, they're the white guilt, the white privilege is that we're, the white man's burden, that we're going to bring these people up and it feels good to help them. So when you see that, it feels good. And then we're just sort of conditioned with explanations for when black people or brown people act out. It's not their fault. It's systemic. It's their circumstances. You know what I mean? Like, we can't hold children to the same standard as adults, but if a child uses a $5 word like, "Oh, good for you, Johnny." So I think that's a lot of it. I mean, I just sort of see it for what it is, which is, I guess I see paternalism where other people just are blind to it, or maybe I'm got a screw loose, but that's, I think, a defining difference.
I mean, what I see is that there's a small group of people who have extremely radical views on race, who respond extremely negatively to our multiracial society.
Where did white flight come from? Was that a minority of whites? Do a minority of whites want to send their kids to good schools? Do a minority of whites know what crime means? We all know. We just also know that speaking up in public will get you ostracized. And even if the person you're talking to agrees with you, they're going to be like, "Oh my God, the guy's speaking heresy. Like, I can't be seen listening to this guy talk about heresy." Outside of like certain circles where either people are of such low class that they have nothing to lose, or they don't have, I guess, the intelligence to even absorb that social conditioning. Okay. Or you have people like myself that are sick of it or have the blessing of anonymity on the internet.
I mean, you have to disentangle various things. You have to disentangle white flight from very, very high crime areas.
Do you think the world fundamentally changed in the last few decades? Whereas like every white person ever that ever lived would basically agree with me, except within the last 50 years. At least publicly admit. Okay?
But that's totally wrong. Like, white people went to other countries, went to other continents.
Abolitionists were like 1% of the population. Okay? Abolition was not a powerful movement in the North in the 1860s. Okay? Historically, white people nobody likes living around other people. Now, in America, in the last 50 years, we have forced kids to go to school to listen to why their natural impulses are naughty. And then if they're like in the upper middle class, they're exposed to the talented 10th, and their personal experience is like, well, LaQuisha, is at least well behaved enough and doesn't seem to commit crime. So, they must all be like that. But I would never go in the ghetto because like it's unsafe for a reason that like my dad tells me, but I'm not quite sure, but I kind of know, but I can't say. I mean, dude, I know what my entire like extended white family, how they feel about people. Okay. Like I know I got dozens of cousins. Okay. Nobody like the exception is like the couple white girl cousins that, rolled around in the mud. Okay. They don't believe what everybody else is selling, but they also went away to college or schools that one would expect them to come back bleeding heart liberals. It is a compulsion. There's a difference between charity and compulsion. I will help people. I have no problem helping anybody of any color, okay, on an individual level. This compulsion, this idea to hear some black talk about reparations.
We did not genocide the Indians.
We genocided the Indians. Are you
That's
joking?
such nonsense. We did not genocide the Indians. We cooperated with them. Yeah, we didn't.
We didn't. That? Oh, okay.
We didn't. We cooperated with them. We respected them in terms of law.
Well,
yes,
look,
to an incredible extent. During the war, both sides, both the French and the English, had Indian allies who they worked with in order to fight other white people. And Indians, there was law about how you had to deal with Indians. What happened with Indians was not that they were genocided, but that the introduction of all these diseases meant that their children would die. Meant that they had a below replacement fertility. They were living alongside whites peacefully in very many contexts, despite the early histories of incredible clashes. It's just
they were not living. They were not living in their towns. They were not living in their towns. They did not have the right to vote.
They were going into towns and burning down houses, burning women and children alive. They had to face much worse than you ever had to face.
Extremely segregated.
Much worse than you ever had to face. Yeah, it worked out pretty well for everybody, except for the fact that the Indians died. The Indians died.